I stood in front of my brother's wedding, wearing his name, his suit, and his life. No one in that room knew the truth, not even the bride at first. But when she finally looked at me, she whispered something that froze my blood. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just replacing my brother. I was stepping into something I could never escape. Welcome to life revenge, where every secret has a price and every choice comes back for you. I still remember that night like it happened yesterday, even though a part of me wishes I could erase it completely. I was standing in front of a mirror, wearing a suit that didn't belong to me, trying to breathe normally while my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The room felt too small, like the walls were closing in on me with every second that passed. Outside, I could hear voices, laughter, the sound of people arriving for a wedding that was supposed to belong to my brother Daniel. But inside that room, there was only silence and pressure and the unbearable weight of what I had agreed to do. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Just a few hours, just a ceremony, nothing more than helping family in a crisis. That's what my parents said. That's what I repeated in my head like a broken record. Daniel couldn't walk properly after the accident. He was still recovering, still weak, still lying in pain most of the time. The doctors said stress could make things worse for him, so the wedding couldn't be delayed. Everything had already been paid for. Guests had already flown in from different states. My parents were terrified of embarrassment, of social judgment, of what people in our community would say if the wedding was cancelled at the last moment. So they looked at me. I didn't even have time to think properly when they asked. It was like the question itself carried a trap inside it. Just stand in for him during the ceremony, they said. No one will know. It's only for appearance. Melissa's family must not find out. It will destroy everything. I remember staring at them, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a sick joke. But no one laughed. My mother was crying quietly. My father looked exhausted, like he had already accepted this as the only solution left. And Daniel, he didn't say much. He just looked away. That silence from him was the hardest part, because in that moment, I wasn't just being asked to step into a role. I was being asked to step into his identity, his life, his future. And for a few seconds, I actually thought I could say no. I thought I could walk away and not be part of it. But then I thought about everything falling apart. The wedding being ruined, the shame, the headlines in family groups, the disappointment. And somehow, against every logical part of my mind, I nodded. That single nod changed everything. They started preparing me immediately, like there was no time to reconsider. Daniel's suit was brought out. His shoes were polished. Someone even tried to show me how he usually stands, how he smiles, how he greets people. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was preparing for a role in a play I never auditioned for. But the more I stood there, the more I realized nobody was treating it like a joke. This was serious, dead serious. I kept looking at my reflection, trying to recognize myself, but all I could see was someone else slowly replacing me. The suit fit, but it didn't feel right. The collar felt tight around my neck, like it was reminding me that I didn't belong in it. Every time I adjusted it, I felt like I was adjusting into someone I wasn't supposed to become. Then I heard the first sound of guests arriving outside. That's when my stomach dropped, because reality finally hit me fully. This wasn't preparation anymore. This was happening. I walked toward the hallway slowly, each step heavier than the last. I could hear music starting in the background, soft wedding music playing through speakers. People were talking, laughing, taking seats. Everything felt normal to them, beautiful even. But for me, it felt like I was walking into a situation I would never be able to undo, and then I saw her for the first time that day. Melissa. She was standing across the hall, getting ready to walk in. She was dressed like a bride should be, calm, composed, almost glowing under the lights. But what hit me wasn't her appearance. It was her eyes. The moment they landed on me, something strange happened. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look confused like someone who was about to marry the wrong person. Instead, her expression changed slightly, like she had been waiting for something and had finally confirmed it. That moment confused me deeply, but I couldn't stop moving forward. There was no escape now. I remember standing behind the doors waiting for the ceremony to begin, hearing the music get louder, hearing footsteps, hearing people settling down. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my ears. My palms were cold, almost numb. I kept telling myself again and again that it would be over soon. Just smile. Just stand there. Just don't make any mistake. But then something unexpected happened. Right before the doors opened, I turned slightly and looked at Melissa again from a distance, and for a split second, she looked directly at me. Not at Daniel's name, not at the situation, but at me. It was the kind of look that didn't belong in a normal wedding. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't nervousness. It was awareness, like she already knew something that I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. That's when a strange thought entered my mind for the first time. What if she knows? What if this isn't as hidden as I think it is? But before I could process it properly, the doors started opening, and the music swelled, and every thought in my head got swallowed by the moment I had been trying to avoid from the beginning, and I found myself stepping forward into a life that wasn't mine, feeling like every eye in the room was watching something far more complicated than they could possibly understand. My life didn't start with drama or struggle the way people assume when they hear stories like this. I was just a normal guy living in Texas, trying to keep my head down and not cause problems. I worked a simple job, nothing impressive, nothing people would brag about. I wasn't the kind of person who got attention in a room. If anything, I was the one people forgot was even there after a while. That had been my role in my family for as long as I could remember. My older brother Daniel was the successful one, the confident one, the one who made my parents proud without even trying. I was always compared to him, even when no one said it directly. It was just understood in the way people looked at us differently, spoke to us differently, expected different things from us. Daniel had everything lined up perfectly. Good career, stable income, respect in the family, and now a marriage with Melissa. Everyone said he had made it. And I guess I believed that too, in a quiet way, like it was something I could never reach. I didn't resent him at first. He was my brother. I respected him. But there was always that silent distance between us, like we lived in two different worlds even under the same roof. He was the one people talked about. I was the one who listened. When Melissa came into the picture, everything around Daniel became even brighter. She was kind, elegant, and well-liked by everyone who met her. She didn't come from our city originally, which made her even more interesting to people in our family circle. There was excitement every time her name was mentioned. She was treated like the perfect addition to an already perfect life, and I stayed in the background of it all, helping with small tasks, carrying things, fixing small issues, showing up when needed, but never really being noticed. That's how I ended up involved in their wedding preparations in the first place. At first it was harmless. Picking up decorations, helping arrange venues, running small errands when Daniel was busy. I didn't think much of it. It felt normal, like family helping family. I never imagined it would turn into something that would completely change the direction of my life. But everything shifted after Daniel's accident. One moment he was preparing for his wedding like nothing could go wrong, and the next moment he was lying in a hospital bed, unable to walk properly. The shock hit everyone hard. My parents were devastated, but their worry quickly turned into panic about the wedding. It was already fully planned. Deposits were paid. Guests were confirmed. Canceling it wasn't something they were emotionally prepared for, especially in our extended family culture where appearances and reputation mattered deeply. I remember the conversations clearly, even though I wish I didn't. They weren't loud arguments. They were quiet discussions in corners of the house, whispered voices filled with stress and urgency. The idea kept coming back again and again until it stopped sounding like an idea and started sounding like a solution. That was the dangerous part. The more it was repeated, the more normal it began to feel. Then one evening, they called me into the room. I could feel it immediately, even before they spoke, that this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. My mother wouldn't look directly at me. My father kept rubbing his forehead like he was trying to push away a headache that wouldn't go away. Daniel was there too, sitting quietly, his expression tired and distant. And then they said it. They wanted me to take his place at the wedding ceremony. At first, I didn't understand what I was hearing. I actually asked them to repeat it because my brain refused to accept it the first time. But when they explained it again, slower this time, the reality became heavier. It wasn't about replacing him permanently. It was just for appearances, just for the ceremony, just so no one would ask questions, just so the wedding wouldn't be ruined. They made it sound like a temporary costume change, but I could feel something deeper underneath it. My first reaction was disbelief. I even laughed nervously, thinking surely someone else would step in and say this was insane, but no one did. Instead, they kept explaining why it was necessary, how it would protect Daniel from stress, how it would save Melissa's family from embarrassment, how it would maintain respect in front of the guests. Every reason they gave was practical, logical, and emotionally heavy at the same time. I looked at Daniel, hoping he would refuse, hoping he would say no and shut it down immediately. But he didn't. He just sat there quietly, not agreeing, not refusing, just existing in silence. That silence said more than words could. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't courage. It wasn't confidence. It was pressure. Pressure from expectation, from family duty, from the fear of being the one who breaks everything. I wasn't thinking about what I wanted. I was thinking about what would happen if I said no. The disappointment, the chaos, the blame. So when they asked me again, I didn't argue. I said yes, even though a part of me knew I shouldn't, even though I had no idea what I was stepping into. After I agreed, I thought the worst part was already behind me, but I quickly realized I was wrong in a way that kept getting heavier with every passing hour. The moment I said yes, everything around me started changing shape, like reality itself was adjusting to a decision I didn't fully understand. People stopped asking questions and started giving instructions. It was no longer a discussion. It became preparation. The house turned into a quiet kind of chaos. Not loud panic, but controlled urgency. My mother was constantly moving between rooms, checking details, making sure nothing looked out of place. My father was on the phone most of the time, handling guests, arrangements, and explanations that sounded rehearsed. Daniel was mostly in his room, recovering, but even when he came out, there was a strange distance in his eyes, like he was watching something happening to his life without being able to stop it. And me, I was stuck in the middle of it all, wearing a role that felt heavier with every minute. The first time they brought Daniel's wedding suit for me to try on, I felt something uncomfortable I couldn't explain. It wasn't just about clothes. It was about identity. The suit wasn't mine, but I was expected to fit into it perfectly, not just physically, but emotionally, socially, even behaviorally. They started correcting small things about me without saying it directly. The way I stood, the way I smiled, the way I responded to questions. Everything had to match Daniel. At first I thought I could manage it. Just imitate him for a few hours, get through the ceremony, and then go back to normal. But the more I tried, the more I realized how much attention people paid to tiny details. Daniel wasn't just a name in this wedding. He was a presence everyone expected to feel. And I was trying to recreate that presence without ever really knowing how. Melissa was the part that made everything more complicated. She didn't act nervous or confused like I expected someone would in this situation. Instead, she was calm, almost too calm. During the preparations, she would sometimes look at me in a way that made me uncomfortable, like she was observing something behind the surface. I kept telling myself it was just stress. Weddings are emotional. Accidents make everything complicated. People react differently. That's what I tried to believe, but there were moments I couldn't ignore. The way she paused before calling me Daniel the first time. The slight hesitation in her voice that disappeared too quickly to question. The way she sometimes spoke to me like she was testing something, asking casual questions that felt strangely specific. Nothing direct enough to accuse, but enough to make me think at night when I couldn't sleep. Every evening before the wedding, I practiced how to act. My parents would go over small details, how Daniel usually greets guests, how he stands during conversations, how he responds to compliments. I started realizing how little I actually knew about my own brother in a social sense. We lived in the same house, but we were never the same kind of person in public. Now I was being asked to become that version of him without having ever lived it. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was already inside something I couldn't exit. My mind kept replaying the same thought over and over. This is temporary, this is temporary, this is temporary. But my body didn't believe it. My chest felt tight, my stomach restless. Every sound in the house felt louder than it should have. Doors closing, footsteps, muffled voices in other rooms. Everything felt like it was leading toward a moment I couldn't avoid. When the morning came, it didn't feel like a normal day. It felt like stepping into something staged, something already decided without my full understanding. The house was full of movement. Relatives were arriving, cars were being prepared, phones were ringing constantly. I was taken into a separate room where people helped me get ready. Shirt adjusted, jacket straightened, hair checked, shoes polished. Every detail refined until I looked less like myself and more like an expectation. That's when I first noticed how strange it felt to see my reflection. It wasn't that I looked different. It was that I didn't feel connected to what I was seeing. The face in the mirror was mine, but the role attached to it wasn't. It was like watching someone else being prepared to walk into a life that already belonged to another person. Then came the moment I had been dreading without fully admitting it. The music started outside, that soft wedding music that signals everything is about to begin. People started moving toward their seats. Conversations lowered into whispers. The atmosphere shifted from preparation to execution. I could feel time slowing down in a way that made everything sharper. And then I saw Melissa again, waiting near the entrance, already in her wedding dress. The way she looked at me that moment wasn't emotional in the way I expected. It wasn't excitement or fear or confusion. It was something steadier, something that made me feel like I was not the only one aware that this situation was more complicated than it appeared on the surface. For a brief second, I wondered if she knew, not guessed, not suspected, but actually knew. The thought passed quickly, but it didn't leave completely. It stayed in the back of my mind like a quiet warning I couldn't ignore. Before I could process it further, someone signaled that it was time. The doors were about to open. The guests were waiting. The ceremony was starting. And I was about to step into a moment that would define everything that followed, whether I was ready or not. After the ceremony, I thought the hardest part of this whole situation was finally over. I kept telling myself that once the vows were spoken, once the guests clapped, once the photos were taken, everything would slowly return to normal. I could step out of that role, remove Daniel's identity from my shoulders, and go back to being invisible again in my own simple life. But that belief didn't survive even the first real conversation after the wedding. The reception was loud, full of music, laughter, and celebration. But I wasn't feeling any of it. I was moving through it like I was still performing, smiling when people came to congratulate Daniel, shaking hands, accepting blessings. It felt like I was inside someone else's dream that I didn't belong to. Every time someone said my brother's name, I responded automatically, even though inside I kept reminding myself that I was not him. That disconnect started to feel heavier as the hours passed. Melissa was different from everyone else that night. While others were focused on celebration, she wasn't fully present in the same way. She wasn't overly emotional. She wasn't overly excited. And she wasn't playing the role of a traditional bride lost in joy. Instead, she was observing everything quietly, watching people, watching me. At first, I tried not to think too much about it. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she was processing everything differently. That was the explanation I wanted to believe. But then she approached me when no one was around. It was late in the evening, the reception lights dimmer, guests scattered in small groups. I was standing near a corner trying to breathe for a moment when she walked up. She didn't smile the way others did. She didn't speak loudly. Her voice was calm, almost careful, like she had already decided what she was going to say. "When did you start lying for him?" she asked. The question didn't register properly at first. I actually blinked, thinking I misunderstood her. My instinct was to deny it immediately, to laugh it off, to pretend she was saying something random. But something in her expression stopped me. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't confused. She was observing. I asked her what she meant, trying to sound normal, but my voice didn't feel steady. She tilted her head slightly, like she had been expecting that response. Then she said something that completely changed the way I saw everything. I knew it wasn't Daniel at the altar. Those words didn't hit me like a surprise. They hit me like exposure, like something I had been hiding in darkness had suddenly been placed under a light. My stomach dropped instantly, and for a few seconds I couldn't even respond. She continued without raising her voice, explaining calmly that Daniel never looked at her the way I did during the ceremony. She said it wasn't about appearance. It was about behavior, timing, hesitation, the way someone breathes under pressure. Small details I thought no one would notice. Details I didn't even realize I was revealing. The worst part was that she wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing me. She was simply stating what she had already accepted. That changed everything in my mind. I kept thinking about how long she had known. During the ceremony? Before it? From the beginning. My mind started replaying every interaction, every glance, every moment I thought I was successfully hiding behind Daniel's identity. Suddenly, none of it felt hidden anymore. It felt exposed in a way I couldn't reverse. But what came next confused me even more. She didn't confront me in front of others. She didn't create a scene. She didn't even threaten to expose anything. Instead, she started behaving normally again in public, as if nothing had happened. But privately, she became more direct with me in ways that didn't make sense at first. She would ask me questions about my thoughts, not Daniel's. She would talk to me when no one was listening, not in a romantic way, but in a deeply personal way that felt like she was trying to understand who I really was underneath everything. At first, I thought she was manipulating the situation, trying to trap me into admitting something. But the more I interacted with her, the more I realized she wasn't playing a game. She was analyzing something. And the uncomfortable truth was that I was the subject. Days after the wedding, things between her and Daniel started becoming tense. Not because of me directly, but because of distance. Emotional distance that had probably existed long before the accident, but now it was impossible to ignore. I found myself unintentionally in the middle of conversations that felt too personal, too complicated, too real for me to be part of. Melissa started opening up in ways I didn't expect. About expectations, about pressure, about feeling unseen. And without realizing it, I started responding honestly too, not as Daniel, not as a replacement, but as myself. That was the dangerous shift I didn't notice at first. The more I spoke as myself, the more I stopped performing. And the more I stopped performing, the more everything around me started to change shape. My relationship with Daniel felt heavier, like something unspoken was growing between us. Not hatred, not betrayal exactly, but something unsettled. He started noticing changes too. The way Melissa interacted differently. The way I no longer fit comfortably into the role I had been forced into. The tension didn't explode immediately, but it started building slowly in every conversation, every silence, every glance that lasted too long. And I was stuck in the middle of all of it, realizing that what I thought was a temporary replacement had already become something far more complicated than I ever agreed to step into. I still remember the night everything finally broke open, because it didn't feel like a dramatic explosion at first. It felt quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that sits in a room right before something irreversible happens. We were all in my parents' house, the same place where this entire mess had started, but now it felt different. Heavier. Like the walls had absorbed every secret, every lie, every unsaid truth. Daniel had found out pieces of everything before this night. Not all at once, but slowly. Questions he couldn't ignore. Gaps in stories. The way Melissa behaved around me. The way I reacted when his name was used during the wedding. At first, he tried to dismiss it. I could see that struggle in him. The struggle of a man trying to protect his own reality from collapsing. But truth has a way of building pressure until it demands to be spoken out loud. That night, he finally asked me directly. No anger in his voice at first. Just confusion mixed with something deeper that I couldn't fully read. He asked me what really happened during the wedding ceremony. Not in general terms. Not in vague questions. He wanted the exact truth. Every detail. And I knew in that moment that there was no escaping it anymore. My parents were there too. So was Melissa. That alone made the air in the room feel unbearable. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I tried to find the right way to explain something that had no clean version. There is no simple way to tell someone you stepped into their identity, even if it was only for a ceremony. No version of that sounds acceptable when spoken out loud. I started slowly. I told them everything. The accident, the pressure, the decision I never fully felt prepared for. How I became Daniel in appearance but never in reality. How I stood at the altar under his name, wearing his suit, speaking words that weren't mine. I didn't try to make myself look better in that moment. There was no point. The truth was already heavy enough. Daniel listened without interrupting, but I could see his face changing with every sentence, not just anger. Something more complicated. Betrayal mixed with disbelief, mixed with the pain of realizing that his life had continued without him in ways he didn't authorize. That someone else had stood in his place while he was lying in a hospital bed. When I finished, there was a long silence. The kind of silence that makes you wish someone would speak, even if it's something painful, just to break the pressure. Then Daniel looked at Melissa. That was when things shifted again. Because instead of reacting emotionally like I expected, she stayed calm. Too calm. She didn't deny anything I said. She didn't defend me either. She just listened, like she had already processed most of it long before this conversation happened. And then she said something that no one in that room expected. She said she never truly connected with the Daniel she married that day. Not because of deception alone, but because something about the moment felt real in a different way. She admitted that she had felt more seen in those brief interactions with me than in months of engagement with Daniel. That confession hit the room harder than anything else. Daniel couldn't process it immediately. I could see it in the way he looked between both of us, trying to understand where his life had been redirected without his awareness. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about identity, connection, and the uncomfortable realization that people don't always belong to the roles we assign them. My parents tried to step in at that point, trying to restore order, trying to remind everyone of family, respect, consequences. But it was too late for that. The structure they had built around appearances was already cracked beyond repair. Daniel stood up suddenly and walked out of the room. No shouting, no final words, just silence as he left. That moment felt heavier than any argument could have been. Melissa stayed seated for a while after that. She didn't follow him immediately. She just looked at the floor, like she was sorting through something inside herself. And then she said she couldn't continue living in a situation built on confusion and emotional distance. She didn't say it with anger. She said it with finality. That was the moment everything shifted again. Not toward resolution, not toward clarity, but toward separation. She left the marriage shortly after that night. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, decisive way that made it clear she had already made her choice internally long before speaking it out loud. Daniel moved out for a while after that. I didn't see him much. When I did, conversations were short, controlled, distant. The bond we had before all of this didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't completely gone, but it was damaged in ways neither of us knew how to repair quickly. And I was left sitting in the middle of everything that had collapsed around me, realizing something uncomfortable about myself in the process. I didn't just step into someone else's role for a day. I stepped into a situation that revealed parts of every person involved, including me, that none of us were prepared to face directly. Nothing returned to how it was before that night, and even though time continued moving forward, it was clear that something permanent had already changed for all of us.